We have an inverse circumstance here. The right is saying the illegal immigrants are going to...
What are you talking about? The only thing that happened was Trump came in, and the ones who had been found to be guilty, he pardoned. So he was like, I absolve you of your sins, my flock. Now go forth, and hopefully do that again for me, because I might need you in the future. I got some wacky stuff planned.
Like, what do you do about all the criminals? Take them all? Fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
What about due process? No, fuck that. Well, here's the problem with fuck that. What if you are an enemy?
I don't think I've ever seen an intro to
Speaking on his
Timcast.
show, Joe Rogan slammed the idea of...
Is this all new? There's a little bit more pageantry now. It's not just him and then, like, you know, the news article beside him as he just starts rambling for 15 minutes straight. My friends! Now there's music. There's even a graphic. Look at that.
Mass deportations without due process. And while the larger context of this may not actually be Joe Rogan insinuating the Trump administration has engaged in a violation of due process, the argument is that people on the right largely are in favor of violating due process, which is not the case. What is actually happening is that each and every one of these individuals being deported does have due process. However, the precedent under the law is clear. If you are not a citizen and you are here illegally, what due process means for you is different as to what it means for American citizens. These individuals are being deported under the law, which they're allowed to do. Now, the Supreme Court has recently come out saying Trump can...
No, they actually admitted one of the cases, Abrego Garcia, was done in error. They admitted to the error. They said, yeah, that was wrong. We shouldn't have done that. This Maryland man.
And not deport under the Alien Enemies Act anymore. But still, the deportations, as we've seen them so far, have functioned correctly under due process. Now, Joe Rogan's argument, as you see in the opening clip, is basically that the next president will do these things to you. This is not a good argument. And I wanted to address this and then go over where we are at with this story of these mass deportations and what Joe Rogan is missing in the philosophical context that he brings up. Now, Joe's a smart guy, so he certainly understands things like the quote from Nietzsche about gazing into the abyss, as well as Blackstone's formulation, as Benjamin Franklin had.
That's important to me. I want to know that, you know, before a judge renders a verdict, whether or not he understands Nietzsche. And how in-depth does he understand it, all right? I don't want some cursory 101 easy shit.
Adapted it. But I do think that there is a greater question beyond these precepts which needs to be addressed. So let me play this clip for you of Joe, and we'll address what he says.
What about due process? No, fuck that. Well, here's the problem with fuck that. The problem with things that are going in a radical direction, and then there's an overcorrection. So the overcorrection is lack of due process. The overcorrection is like round them all up, ship them to jail. Like that's like some things that you say when you're not thinking things through. Like, what do you do about all the criminals? Take them all, fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
All right, so let's pause real quick. Joe is right here. There's got to be due process, 100%. We as a nation cannot tolerate innocent and wrongly accused people.
But in this case, the people he's talking about are not even U.S. citizens, except for the few exceptions in which they were 100% U.S. citizens that were detained by ICE. But those people have been released. They're back, you know. And in the case of, you know, the Maryland man, he's not actually a Maryland man at all. I'll have you know. He was actually born in El Salvador. Yeah, so take that. And you heard about the tattoos on his knuckles? There's a weed one, and then a happy face, a smiley face, and then a cross. Probably three of the most common tattoos on Earth. But in that combination, when put in that sequence, it actually is MS-13. So how about that?
Being sent to El Salvador. The reason this story comes up, though, the context that is important, is this is pertaining to Abrego Garcia, as well as another man who was accused of being just a hairdresser. The issue at hand, however, is that we have an argument between Democrats and Republicans, the left and the right, liberals, conservatives, anti-establishment, pro-establishment, as to who actually is a gang member. The fact of the matter is,
Even Republicans are now coming out and starting to call this out as pretty absurd and ridiculous. You're supposed to actually do what the judge says, right? Otherwise, I mean, isn't the entire purpose of the United States to have various branches of government to keep power in check so that monarchs can't rule? That's the whole point.
These people went before immigration judges. That is their due process as individuals who are not citizens. Now, if Joe is simply
like, it could be said that it's a calling card if you were someone who was only seen publicly constantly wearing some kind of like a black hoodie, and that like you would not be able to be photographed unless you were wearing that black hoodie. Like there is no like pictures. Maybe just one video or two exist if you were doing like a Reddit AMA and you wanted to be silly and reveal to the world that you wanted to have a shoe on your bald head, or a guy pulled it off to reveal that you in fact were bald underneath, and that video went viral. Could be another thing. But like if all you were ever seen in is a black hoodie, and then it turns out that there are gangs that do that too, where they're only seen in black hoodies, I mean, then by association, that could mean that Tim Pool himself is in a gang.
saying that process is totally fine, then we've got no issue. If his argument is this is a lack of due process, he would be wrong. But as Joe does end up bringing up, a hairdresser, for instance, that is a talking point from the left and not what the courts found. But let me play more.
Sorry, but you're talking about two separate things, and the courts never found that in the other case that person didn't happen to be a hairdresser. That was actually the person's wife, I believe, wife or family member who was saying that that the person actually was in fact working there. Mother, sister? Well, I got to look this up.
What about due process? No, fuck that. Well, here's the problem with fuck.
No one is saying F due process. No, let me put it this way. No legitimate
The Trump administration is. You're just saying that it doesn't apply because in this case, these people don't fall under the purview of American citizens, so it's okay. Right? You're like, well, he may have been living in Maryland for 10 plus years or whatever. He may be a steel worker there, but ultimately he was born in El Salvador. And so it doesn't apply to him. We're saying that American citizens should still get due process.
Prominent personality is saying there should be no due process. The right is arguing this is their due process. It happened.
What if you are an enemy of, let's not say any current president. Let's pretend we got a new president.
Yeah, then that would be, by definition, illegal, right? Gilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador who was illegally deported from the United States on March 15, 2025, in what the Trump administration called a, quote, administrative error. He was imprisoned without trial in the Salvadorian Maximum Security Terrorism Confinement Center, despite never having been charged with nor convicted of a crime in either country. As part of an agreement between the two countries, that El Salvador imprisoned U.S. deportees there for payment. The administration has defunded the deportation in the press by accusing him of membership in MS-13 gang, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, an accusation based on a bail determination made during the 2019 immigration court proceeding, which Abrego Garcia contested. Abrego Garcia grew up in El Salvador and then immigrated illegally to the United States in 2011 at the age of 16 to escape gang threats. In 2019, an immigration judge granted him withholding of removal status, a rare alternative to asylum due to the danger he faced from gang violence if he returned to El Salvador. This status allowed him to live and work legally in the United States. At the time of his deportation in 2025, he was living in Maryland with his wife and children, all American citizens, I should add, and was complying with annual checkups with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. On April 10, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously ruled that Abrego Garcia's removal to El Salvador was illegal. The court rejected the administration's defense, which claimed it lacked the legal authority to exercise jurisdiction over El Salvador and secure his return. Justice Sotomayor noted that his argument implied the government could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. The Supreme Court required the U.S. to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release, but stopped short of a lower court's directive to both facilitate and effectuate his return, instead directing the lower court to clarify by what it meant by effectuate. The administration interpreted facilitate to mean that it is not obligated to arrange his release and return, and can meet the obligation by admitting him into the United States and providing a plane, if El Salvador chooses to release him, which President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador refuses to do. Bukele stated in an Oval Office meeting that he would not smuggle a terrorist into the United States. U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen met with Abrego Garcia in El Salvador on April 18th and told him that he had been transferred from COT to another prison in El Salvador where he's being held in isolation. So I think it's pretty clear.
Totally new guy in 2028. And this is a common practice now of just rounding up gang members with no due process and shipping them to El Salvador. You're a gang member. No, I'm not. Prove it. What? I got to go to court. No, no due process.
So the important thing to consider, this line of thought that is brought up by Joe on his show begins with a falsehood. Now, if the argument...
It's so funny that Tim had always branded himself as being this kind of like milquetoast liberal, just so he could position himself on the right as kind of like, oh, by the way, I'm not like, you know, a right winger. I'm not like MAGA. All right, I simply usually find that I agree with a lot of their politics, so I will. He's gone from that to just full throated, like, how dare you question what Trump is doing, Joe? On your, what are you doing, Joe? Did you not know that an immigration court order originally ruled that he was in fact an MS-13 gang member, even though he himself contested that? And did you not know that apparently he has MS-13 gang tattoos, even though they don't reflect any of the MS-13 gang tattoos that we already are well aware of that MS-13 gang members do have? He doesn't have any of those, but he does have a sequence of events on his knuckles that in the proper order could be a decoder ring for MS-13. Did you know that, Joe? So does that count?
From Joe is, I'm just saying broadly speaking, then fine. The issue is in the context of the news. This conversation only exists under the presumption that due process was violated and that people on the right want to strip people of their due process. No one is advocating that American citizens get no fair trial. Quite the opposite. No one is arguing that illegal immigrants don't get a hearing before leaving, for the most part.
I was like, that's exactly what happened, though. You do realize that, right? And then even the Supreme Court, including judges appointed by Donald Trump himself, who are very right-leaning, all of them were like, no, it was a unanimous decision. You cannot do this, because if we do this, we set a precedent that you can literally deport any single person that you want to a forced labor camp, and that would be bad. And that was, again, the very right-leaning Supreme Court of the United States was even like, no, all right? So we're now going to defer to the lower court to basically clear up what they meant by facilitate, and then we're going to have to move on from there.
Are arguing. So we all agree, for the most part, if you're an illegal immigrant, we have to prove you are. And in the case of Abrego Garcia, 2 courts determined this. I've got the documents for you. And either...
Well, no. But then another court after the fact, which supersedes the lower court, because there is a triage, if you will. There is an order to which each court has more authority over the other. They've already shown that they do not agree with that decision. I'm not just talking about the Supreme Court decision, by the way, which unanimously said you cannot do that. You illegally deported him. You have to bring him back. But I'm talking about the lower court one that originally said that rather than asylum, we're going to provide him with this other provision, which says he cannot be deported back to El Salvador because it could result in a threat to his life. And from, you'll never believe this, gang members, which he is not one of. So there's that. He's saying that you've been duped, that you were fooled. Yes, by propaganda the Democrats have put out there, that apparently they're making you want to believe in the idea of due process. But it's not real. It's an illusion.
Not a real argument. He goes on to mention, what about the next president? Let's go back 4 years. The Biden administration arrested, charged, and imprisoned people without due process. Thousands of J6ers. Now the Democrats are arguing they got their...
They were arrested. They were read their rights. They were then given trials. What do you think due process is? They had court hearings.
Due process. We have an inverse circumstance here. The right is saying the illegal immigrants are going to...
What are you talking about? The only thing that happened was Trump came in, and the ones who had been found to be guilty, he pardoned. So he was like, I absolve you of your sins, my flock. Now go forth and hopefully do that again for me, because I might need you in the future. I got some wacky stuff planned. Oh, you're going to like it.
Due process, and the J6ers did not. And the Democrats are saying the J6ers certainly did, and the immigrants are not. The fact of the matter is...
None of that is true. What are you talking about? They're completely different and distinctive situations. One in which there were American citizens, many of whom committed a crime, that they were arrested, they were given their day in court, they were given their trials, and those who were found guilty were spending time in jail until effectively Donald Trump got reelected and pardoned them. They had due process, start to finish. And unless you're saying that, like, they should not, it was wrong to arrest them even in the first place, But then you're basically setting a precedent in which you think is or is not illegal, and not what are or are not crimes. That's where you want to be headed, right? And I don't think it's wrong for people to try and violently hang the vice president of the United States, because at the end of the day, he wouldn't certify Trump. So that upset me and made me sadsies. And so in that case, I think it's justified, the things that were going to happen to him.
These stories knows many of these J6ers, many of these people, judges barred evidence, barred witness testimony. In one instance, a man was in.
So you're not saying out loud what you think you're saying out loud. It's not due process. You think there was a kangaroo court. You think they were not given fair trials. That's really different. Like, he just said they were sentenced. Who sentenced them? I don't know. The magical fairy that does unfair things, apparently, and that's why the whole thing doesn't count.
Solitary for years without a trial. Numerous instances of individuals being denied due process, but only under the veil of getting a fair.
What process was due? There was a trial, and a judge rendered a verdict. That's all there is to it.
Fair hearing. If that's the world Democrats want to live in for American citizens, then we've got ourselves a problem. So when Joe makes the point,
I mean, I don't know why I was pulling up other articles. We got to go way back. Due process of law is application by the state of all legal rules and principles pertaining to a case, so all legal rights that are owed to a person are respected. Due process balances the power of law of the land that protects the individual person from it. When a government harms a person without following the exact course of the law, this constitutes a due process violation, which offends
American individuals in this way. We are already in the wartime context brought about by Democrats who arrested peaceful protesters and called them terrorists, who targeted parents who went to PTA meetings.
They weren't peaceful. What is the revisionist history on this? Like, why not just accept that, like, a bad thing happened instead of trying to, like, I remember the day after January 6th, January 7th, I was watching almost every single right-winger to see how they were reflecting upon it. And they weren't telling this whole, like, okay, the Alex Joneses and the Tim Pools and all the conspiracy brains and the Steven Crowders, yes, they were saying that the whole thing was probably Antifa and a false flag shit and all that weird stuff. But Dennis Prager, of all people, was willing to sit there on PragerU and just straight up being like, that was bad. But the difference is when a bad thing happens and the right does it, we admit it. That's the difference. And that's why, we are different than the left. We are different than the violent extremists of the left, because we can sit down and reflect and basically be responsible for our own. That's the difference. And like, whoa, what a difference a few years make, fast forward to now. The whole thing was fake. They were unfairly accused of doing crimes when none of them committed crimes. There was no violence at all that day. The whole thing was completely peaceful. Every one of them was innocent after all.
Who tried to imprison the frontrunner himself and arrested his lawyers and associates and tried to put them in prison. In some instances, they did. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro went to prison. So I say this.
I still forget that. That's funny.
By all means, make that argument. But the next president.
Hey, what's up? Good to see you, friend. When you don't wash your pool often enough, you get scunge and it starts to stink, so no one wants to spend any time with it. Yeah.
What we are looking at right now, my friends, is the knowledge that the Democratic establishment has, can, and will violate your rights if.
Okay, well, weird fear-mongering aside, just so everyone is very clear on this, what Tim is saying is that he does not want there to be due process for non-American citizens, and then using Trump's interpretation of the Alien Enemies Act, he can effectively just be able to decide whether or not he thinks someone should or should not be able to be afforded any kind of rights under the Constitution of the United States. I had been led to believe, even as a non-American, that if you happen to be a green card holder, if you happen to be a permanent citizen, that you were still supposed to fall under the purview of the Constitution of the United States. But apparently that does not apply if you are Venezuelan or El Salvadorian or Argentinian or any range of different backgrounds or ethnicities or countries. If they don't approve of it, apparently, then you are just simply fair game to be swept off the street. And if you even question it, all right, if you have the audacity, as Joe did, to be like, that's kind of fucked up, just feels like they're rounding people off to send to forced labor camps, which is exactly what it is. Well, Tim's here to tell you that the Democrats are way worse because of January 6th. Hypocrisy much?
That is
monsters while we're fighting monsters. I think due process exists for a reason, and the reason is it is horrific for someone to be accused of something they didn't do,
Indeed.
be imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, and then live in a cell, live in a cage with a bunch of
people who did commit shit.
Here it is, Benjamin Franklin. It's better 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent person should suffer.
And this is Benjamin Franklin's adaptation of Blackstone's formulation. Blackstone's formulation was it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent person suffer. And that is true. Because a society that is willing to imprison the innocent with them knowing they will, those innocent will not be innocent because there's no reason to. It will embolden the guilty. But if a system tells you, as the innocent, we will do everything.
You will embolden the guilty.
To protect you and make sure you don't go to prison, then the incentive is to do your best to be a good citizen because we got your back. Here's the problem. As Abraham Lincoln or as Winston Churchill understood, when faced with monsters, sometimes you are facing your annihilation. Let me play more.
That is wisdom that has survived hundreds.
Does he not realize the warning is that you could become the monster itself? That the real danger would be if you happen to have a tyrannical, authoritarian, like monarchy, if you were ruled by a dictator, and that person decided who or is not worthy and should be able to not have rights, well, then that's a very scary precedent. And that's kind of the problem with the whole system.
Hundreds of years, it's incredibly accurate,
Indeed it is.
and it is the foundation of freedom.
Only in a society that is a stable moral tradition, a cohesive cultural system, and is not facing external threats.
We have.
These are hairdressers. These are metal sheet workers who the Trump administration have admitted have committed no crime. They have yet to present a crime that he has committed. The crime is he's non-white looking. That's basically been the pattern here. And that's like the whole like, well, this will never actually happen to U.S. citizens, so we don't have anything to worry. It just did. It did last week. There was a U.S. citizen who was rounded up and detained by ICE, luckily only for 24 hours, but they happened to be a 100% U.S.-born citizen. And again, they happened to match a profile, and that seemed to be enough. And so that's again, it's just one after another break in how far Donald Trump is willing to push authoritarianism in the United States.
To make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters. You can't, like...
Even fucking Joe Rogan got it. Joe fucking HGH brained Rogan understood.
What is that? When you fight monsters, be careful that you don't become one.
Become one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important. It's very important.
Be careful when fighting monsters that you yourself do not become one. For when you gaze into the abyss gazes back. I'm probably getting that somewhat wrong, but that's the general idea. And I say that not to despair. I say Joe's a smart guy, that he understands these concepts. The issue is, I believe, that Joe is misunderstanding the greater context of what is happening in this country.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
You don't realize how bad the threat, all right, of these Venezuelan fellas, well, you Salvadorian, fine, whatever, Salvadorians too. You don't understand the existential threat that they pose to us as Americans. It is they who is the monsters, and we must become monstrous as we devour them with our golden talons and neon eyes. It's like, yeah, you're becoming the monster. It's the whole warning.
Don't let this happen to you. Go to serfscoffee.com to order the only end-to-end owned indigenous coffee company that delivers blood-free, conflict-free, and cruelty-free beans right to your door. 0% of people who drink serfscoffee.com have exploded spontaneously. By ordering right now, you get 10% off plus free shipping, and it's the best way to enjoy delicious coffee while not exploding. That's serfscoffee.com, serfscoffee.com. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This video wouldn't be at all possible without the financial support of all the people whose names you see on the screen right now. And if you want to unlock secret bonus episodes, content that we can't post anywhere else, or get the videos early before anyone else gets to see them, please go on to patreon.com/theserfs. For as little as $1, you can help support this channel and help make more videos like this possible. Our executive producers are Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Garrett Sandoval, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Richard Boehm, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Tigwick, Trav, and Words Greenwood. And also, it wouldn't be possible without all the names you see on the screen right now. Again, if you want to help produce this content, it's only made possible through the funding of our patrons. Head on down to patreon.com/theserfs. That's patreon.com/theserfs.